Yo-yoing scale weight is a difficulty that many people have when it comes to not only achieving weight loss, but sustaining that weight loss for the years to come. A lot of people, maybe you watching this right now or listening to this on the podcast, will have experienced that problem. You are actually very good at losing weight. You are able to put yourself into a calorie deficit, whichever way you choose to do that, whether that was by some sort of fad diet or some shit like that, or you just went down the approach of a good solid diet that got you in the right direction, but actually something happened and that started to all unravel. Those good changes that you'd made, that positive progress you've made actually started to unwind. You put the weight back on, you felt shit about the process, and maybe even you sort of drifted off into overeating episodes, and that really kind of made you push the old fuck it button, and then things really start to go off the rails at that point. So in this particular episode of the podcast, I want to talk about why does that weight regain actually happen, and all these binge eating episodes, if we want to call it that, why do they happen and what you can do about it. So I'm Simon Mitchell, online body transformation coach, founder of I Am Paradise Fitness. Before we start this episode of the podcast, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for watching on YouTube. If you are a fan of the show, you can leave a donation via the link that's in the show notes below. When you do leave a little donation, however big or small, you can also ask a question. Fitness related, training, nutrition, mindset, things like that. You can ask a question and I'll answer it on a future episode of the podcast. Now that's great because I can go into a bit more detail for you to give you some context around the answer rather than in the DMs of Instagram. It's a very, very short response that I can give you. I can go into a little bit more detail on a future episode of the podcast. And of course, your donations really, really do help in order for me to take the podcast to the next level. But for now, let's get straight back into this episode of the podcast. To me, it all starts right back at the beginning with what's going on between your ears. Yes, your mindset when it comes to launching into that dieting process. Now, we live in a world where everything is immediate. We can watch TV on demand. You can have food delivered by just accessing an app on your phone. You can swipe right and hook up with a girl or a guy and basically get laid later that day, if you want to do that sort of thing. Maybe not the best tactic. Anyway, you can also get like dopamine hits from your likes on Instagram. You're getting this instant feedback, this instant gratification. But when it comes to weight loss and fat loss, that's going to be the wrong approach. That's going to be the mindset that leads you to failure and ruin. It's not really going to be a sustainable way to make positive changes. Essentially, the process or the thought process of having this immediacy is really the yo-yo dieter mindset. And that's what you need to try and break away from, because if you don't, you're always going to feel in this trap of saying, well, I want to make faster progress. I should be here. I should be there. They're making faster progress than I am. Why haven't I got my results? Why aren't I making progress? If you're asking all of these questions, it's because you're not set up properly from the beginning. Now, I call my coaching clients lean lifers. Now, that's for a real specific reason, because I want people to achieve that leaner, healthier physique, however you choose to describe that, for life. I want them to do that for good. I don't want them to do it for 5 minutes, a 90-day transformation. I want them to be able to have the habits, the behaviors to sustain that and be educated in how to do that. Now, I think that the key process that you're missing if you are regaining weight constantly, yo-yo dieting, is that you've not focused on habits and behavior change, and you've also not goal setted and kind of bought into the process of identity change from the beginning. Now, I've done so many podcasts about habits, about behavior change, about goal setting, mindset stuff, and I guarantee you only a tiny, tiny percentage of people listening to this show actually take that advice on board and do something about it. Most of you watching this will do fuck all when it comes to habits, behaviors, and mindset. You will only focus in on post-workout nutrition, on what supplements should I be taking, on what exercises should I be doing in the gym. You focus on this shiny shit that you think is going to get you the best results. But actually, it's the basics that you're skipping over because A, either you think it's unimportant, maybe you think it's not sexy enough, maybe you think it's not cool enough, maybe you think it's not manly enough. stuff like this is really holding you back from achieving your goals. The quicker you can get out of that mindset of thinking that it's all about the best exercise, it's all about the best supplement, the best macro split, all of this bollocks, is that the sooner you get out of that and start focusing on what really makes a difference, then you can start making progress. And then once you start that ball rolling, you are getting those basics nailed and you are achieving the things you want to achieve, well then yes, now you can look at those other things that you've been looking at to optimize everything. Thing is, too many people focus on the thin end of the wedge before they focus on what is actually building that solid foundation. So that's the key thing, is that I can talk about goal setting, I can talk about identity change, I can talk about behaviors, all this sort of stuff, but most people, it's in one ear, out the other. Now, if you are listening to this podcast and you are in a situation where you are yo-yo dieting from one to the next, and you're thinking about, okay, should I do this type of diet? Should I do that type of diet? Should I take this supplement, that supplement? Just stop, because whatever you've got in your brain right now is not the right answer. The right answer is going to be working on habits, is going to be working on behavior change, because you can go into a calorie deficit in many, many different ways. Intermittent fasting will get it for you, keto will get it for you. All these different sorts of diets will get you into a calorie deficit, you'll lose weight, but if you haven't worked on what happens after the diet, you're fucked. Because once you follow keto and you go no carb, and then, okay, what happens after that then? Because I actually do fucking like carbs, so I want to really bring these back into my diet. You haven't got a fucking clue how you're going to do that and maintain that progress that you've made. So really start to think about day zero, not even day one, day zero. What am I doing alongside my calorie deficit and training and things like that that is actually going to change the way I approach my health and my nutrition for the long term? Because that's what's going to give you that longevity. That's what's going to give you the ability to sustain your results moving forward. And it's why I have such a huge focus on it with all of my online coaching clients. So when a coaching client starts with me over a 12-week period, over that 12 weeks, yes, we look at calories, we look at optimizing nutrition, we look at training, we look at all the various different aspects going from sleep to energy levels, mood, lots of different things we go into. But there is also a process of behavior change, and there is a 12-week course that they go through from that first week, because it's so important that in parallel with achieving that goal is they're learning how to sustain it. So we will go through a little bit of a habit lesson each week, and then they've got to go and apply it, and then they have to feed back on that as well. Over the course of that time, they are therefore learning how to sustain progress moving forward. And then you might want to think about, well, if you've been through a tracking process, what happens after tracking? If you become surgically attached to your freaking phone and all you can do is exist in MyFitnessPal because that's what you've learned, well then you could be on a hiding to nothing when you try to drift away from MyFitnessPal and you haven't got the skills in place to be able to do that. So again, when I've got a client working with me as an example, we have a course where you can transition away from tracking. Again, it's over multiple weeks, but it's a structured way to build on the habits you've got, but then also drift away from tracking in a structured way. So the thing is about having these processes in place alongside achieving your goal that are actually going to get you sustainability, because that's what you're missing. So what I really do is, a few weeks ago, I released an episode of the podcast where I talked about goal setting. In that particular episode, I went through in detail, I think it was like an 8 or 9 step process, the actual process that I use with my clients to set up their goals. Now, if you go through that and you actually apply yourself to that process, you will come out with a huge amount of goals. Now, when I do this with clients, I have feedback all the time that it leaves them very emotional. Now, I know the guys, now that's going to put you off, but they kind of go through that process and then it's this sort of light bulb moment where they have a real reality check about what it is they're doing right now, what behaviors that are they adopting and they are kind of siding with that are actually stopping them from making progress. And building on that is identity change. And really kind of that thing is that there's a lot of people out there that self-sabotage. And by that, I mean that they really identify with the person they've become. And breaking away from that can be quite difficult. They don't see themselves as the person that goes to the gym all the time. They're not one of those people. I don't really look after my nutrition. I don't do that meal prep thing, and I don't do all that. I'm not a planner. I don't do that. It's all this, I'm not. But if you want to become the best version of yourself, whatever you determine that to be, let's say, for example, that you want to be like a, I don't know, you want to be bigger, leaner, stronger, whatever you want to call it. So you want to build muscle, lose body fat, that sort of thing. If you think about, well, okay, what are the habits and the behaviors of someone that has already achieved that? What do they do every single day? What are their day-to-day habits? Are they going to be someone who plans their week out? Are they going to be someone who goes to the gym 3 or 4 times a week on a regular basis? You know, all of these different things, you've got to identify as that person and then start to make the necessary changes in your lifestyle now so that you start to adopt those behaviors. Because let's face it, if you start adopting the behaviors of who you want to become today, you will start making progress towards that person. If you're always stuck saying, I'm not the person that goes to the gym, that's not me, I'm not that person, I find it really difficult. Well, okay, you're always going to find it difficult. You're never going to make the necessary changes in your lifestyle to progress towards where it is you want to be. So that's a key thing, is focusing on that, identifying the identity change, identifying the gaps, identifying where you might need help. You might need help from, I don't know, a personal trainer in the gym to show you gym technique because you don't know that exercise technique. You might need help from a nutritionist, a coach, to help you understand more about nutrition. You might not need any of those things. You might need something else. I don't know, you might need a fucking psychiatrist to sort your brain out. I don't know. But think about what it is that is going to be those things, those roadblocks that are going to scupper you from achieving that identity change and becoming the person that you want to be. Then you're going to have to think about, again, establishing those habits and those behaviors and putting the time and effort into really applying yourself, because that's going to be one of the things, is you want to be someone who becomes not obsessed, but dedicated to learning the things that you need to learn, to applying yourself. You know, as much effort you put into, you know, figuring out shit about nutrition stuff that doesn't make any difference, put that energy into establishing better habits, behaviors, planning shit, and getting stuff done. That's really going to be where you need to start when it comes to preventing that yo-yo dieting. And the other thing on top of all of that is the dieting strategy that you approach and you choose. Yes, you're going to start with a calorie deficit. If you've been listening to this podcast for any period of time, a calorie deficit is going to be where you need to go in order to achieve weight and fat loss. Now, the way you do that deficit is going to be hugely different depending on what your preferences are. However, what you need to think about is the first thing that you should think about after you've kind of done all the goal setting, identity change, that sort of shit, is think about the way that I'm going to approach this diet. Can I do this after I achieve my goal? If the answer is no, don't even start. Start with an approach to your weight and fat loss that doesn't matter whether you're dieting or not, you can do that. And that's going to create longevity. Otherwise, you're going to slip into this thing of, well, I'm going to do this for 90 days. I'm going to do this for 45 days. But then, you know, life is a lot longer than fucking 90 days. Let me tell you that. So you need to say, well, okay, this approach to managing my nutrition, intermittent fasting, whatever it is that you want to do, or just eating less, whatever you want, can I achieve this? Can I do this long after this diet has finished? If the answer is yes, that's probably going to be a good strategy for you to follow. If the answer is no, you're probably going to be dead in the water a few months after that diet is finished. Now, that's a harsh reality for most people, so you might not like me saying it, but it's fucking true. Now, the other thing is you're going into these like periods of overeating. Now, I'm going to assume that, you know, maybe you're not binge eating in the strictest sense, because if you are binge eating, then that's an eating disorder. You need specific help from a nutritionist, dietitian who specializes in that. That's not for me to comment on or for me to give you any answers or advice on. That's not my field of expertise. Now, if it's more like, okay, I every now and again overeat, and you've labeled that a binge, then that's maybe not a binge eating disorder. There is a subtle difference, but there is a definite difference between the two. Now, in this scenario, again, we've done huge amounts of podcasts on this sort of topics and these sorts of things. You really need to think about, you know, I would say start with thoughts and feelings. When you start to have these overeating periods Are you having particular thoughts? Are you depressed, particularly emotional? Are you highly stressed? Recognize those thoughts and feelings that you have when these things start to happen, so that when you notice them happening again, you can basically hit that imaginary pause button, stop, and then consider your next action. Make the next action after you've hit that pause button a positive one. Ask yourself some questions. Does this action I'm about to take serve me well and serve me to achieving my goals? If it's eating 35 packets of Oreos, it's probably the answer is going to be no. The other question is, how am I going to feel after I do this? Am I going to feel positive or am I going to feel negative? I'm going to feel a lot of guilt and shame. Not that you should feel like that, but is this going to make me feel like that, or is it going to actually do the trick? Very few times can you honestly say, before you have an overeating episode, if you stopped yourself to say, if I eat this entire cake, will it change what I'm feeling? Will it make me less emotional? Will it make me less stressed? The answer is probably, almost definitely, no, it won't. So why don't you think about, okay, let's do something that actually does help. Maybe it's something fun that you like to do. Maybe it's you want to watch something on Netflix. Maybe you phone somebody and have a conversation with somebody. I don't know, maybe you bump uglies with your partner in the bedroom, and that's going to be something much, much better than chowing down on 35 packets of Oreos. But let's face it as well, it's a bit of calorie burn, so why the fuck not, hey? So think about those sorts of things as you go into those sorts of thoughts and feelings. What's going to serve me better? So hopefully this episode of the podcast gave you some insight into, it's not about the diet, it's not about macro splits, supplements, best exercises. These aren't the reasons why you're ping-ponging around with your weight. The reason why you're ping-ponging around yo-yo dieting backwards and forwards is you've not got the right mindset from the beginning, you're not working on habits and behaviors, you're not adopting the right approach in terms of your diet for longevity, and when it comes to these episodes where you're overeating, you're really kind of allowing your mind to get carried away, or you're not really consciously thinking about what it is you're doing. And as soon as you start taking a little bit of conscious thought and ownership of the process, you will start to make a huge amount of change and a huge amount of gains and steps forward, shall we say. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the show. If you did, it would be awesome to hear about it. Find me on Instagram, tag me on some Instagram stories, screenshot your phone where you're listening to the podcast, plaster it on your Instagram, tag me in it at iron_paradise_fitness, drop me a DM, say hi, whatever it is you want to do. And if you want to find out more about nutrition, training, all that sort of good stuff, link in the show notes where you can go access my free online calorie calculator. Once you do that, you're going to get access to a free calorie guide, free 4-week training program. You're going to get access to a guide on managing your cravings. You're going to get a free recipe pack, a whole bunch of stuff that's going to help give you a kickstart to living that leaner, healthier life for good as well. And if you visit ironparadisefitness.com, you can find out all about my online coaching program, the Lean Life Method. So if you want me to take control of your training, your nutrition, and guide you hand in hand through to achieving the body you've been striving for, and ultimately sustain those results for the long term, then we can have a chat about how we actually do that. All the links for all of that are going to be in the show notes below. But for now, all I'm going to say is thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.